The feeling that is spreading the quickest is fear, particularly the fear of one's own life. There is no way to halt the safety efforts. It is extremely challenging to build a governing body that can prevent the unintended consequences of a crisis of this magnitude. The loss of trust can also be caused by a sense of fear. Recent events in Russia have provided us with direct evidence of this fact. The confidence of the Russian people in both their military and their government is beginning to erode. After the story of Russia accidentally bombing Vladimir Putin's home city takes on a new level, the embarrassment that Vladimir Putin has been feeling continues. The second unexploded bomb was discovered in Belgorod, close to the spot where the first bomb had fallen to the ground by accident. A little earlier in the week, the explosive specialists working for the Russian Ministry of Defense made the decision to defuse it at a safe distance. The decision was made by the operational headquarters to conduct an inspection of 17 residences located within a 200-meter radius. Fear spread like wildfire through the ranks of city officials and throughout the population of Russia after the discovery of this device. After it was discovered earlier this week that a second bomb had fallen without detonating, the authorities had a difficult time evacuating the nearby civilian population from their homes. The authorities were required to interview at least 3,000 people in the vicinity. Over the course of the previous few weeks, at least 4,000 individuals have been ordered to leave the city. In the same year, 2022, hundreds of Russian citizens from the city of Belgorod escaped into the interior of the country. The attacks by the Ukrainians in 2022 were the primary impetus for the mass exodus of Russians from the city. However, the series of events that took place this week appear to have been precipitated by the acts of the Russian army, whether those activities were done intentionally or unintentionally. The city was located around 40 kilometers from the Ukrainian border and was home to more than 400,000 Russian residents. On the other hand, the people's growing mistrust of the Russian army and their lack of confidence in their ability to maintain their lives led to a widespread uprising, and they fled their homes as a result. Since March 2022, people in Russian cities on the Ukrainian border, such as Belgorod and Kursk, have continuously abandoned their homes. This exodus was accelerated in September 2022, when train services in Belgorod were blocked due to the city's dense population. In a nutshell, the people who lived there were terrified and panicked as a result of Russian planes attacking their city. In the aftermath of this attack, local residents took to various forms of social media to express their disapproval of the Kremlin administration. The citizens of the area were not pleased with the performance of the Russian troops. The locals of the area emphasized that it was absolutely stunning how incompetent the Russian military was. The unintentional bombing of a city in Russia may simply have been the result of a pilot's lack of skill, according to the opinions of several industry experts. According to the opinion of the military expert, the bombing of the city of Belgrade by Russia may have been a premeditated operation carried out by Russian soldiers who were rebelling against the conflict in Ukraine. The knowledgeable individual claims that the purpose of the soldiers' purposeful deed was to undermine the effectiveness of the military effort. According to Steve Hall, who served as the former chief of Russia operations for the CIA, a planned attack on a Russian city would signal the beginning of an uprising within the ranks of the Russian military. On the other hand, Steve Hall speculated that the explosions may have been brought on by a pilot who lacked the necessary skills. The allegations made regarding the occurrence are pretty extraordinary. It is not yet feasible to ascertain with absolute certainty what caused the explosions, even if it is known that the explosions were carried out on purpose. There is a significant uprising on the horizon in Russia. What exactly is the cause of the incident that resulted in the departure of thousands of Russians and the subsequent evacuation of civilians? Since Russia's invasion of neighboring Ukraine in February 2022, the Belgorod region has been the site of a significant number of bombings and explosions. On their way to what is now recognized as an invasion, Russian troops used the city as one of their staging grounds during their preparations. At the beginning of this week, a Russian fighter jet of the Type Tu-34 dropped an inadvertent bomb on the city of Belgorod, which is located close to the border with Ukraine. People were sent into a state of terror as a result of the bomb that went off in the residential area. The accident resulted in the injuries of 2 people. Eyewitnesses claim that the most recent explosion in the city, which has a population of 413,000 people and was previously the target of missiles, was significantly more violent than the prior explosions. According to the testimonies of those who were there, the surrounding structures began to shake and windows began to shatter after they heard a whistling sound in the sky. The bomb, which had been dropped on a street that was surrounded by apartments, caused an explosion that resulted in the creation of a crater that was 20 meters in diameter. As a result of the intensity of the explosion, a vehicle soared into the air and crashed through the roof of a nearby shop, while other vehicles sustained damage. The governor of Belgorod made the announcement that the occupants of an apartment building with 9 stories would need to be evacuated so that foundation damage could be assessed. In the statements that were made following the explosion, it was argued that Ukraine was responsible for organizing the attack and that a decisive response was required. However, not long after that, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that a bomb was the cause of the explosion that occurred earlier. Fallen to the ground after being dropped from one of their Su-34 aircraft by accident. The ministry did not disclose any further data, but according to estimates provided by military specialists, the ordnance was a bomb weighing approximately 500 kilograms. It is believed that the bomb is a high-precision munition weighing 1,100 pounds and of Soviet design. The bomb reportedly appeared to be set to explode with a brief delay after impact rather than immediately upon impact, causing damage to subsurface installations as a result. This information is provided by military experts. Russia pointed the finger of guilt at the Ukrainian army for the earlier drone assaults that took place in the city. The attacks caused apprehension in Belgorod. Concern was voiced by several of the locals regarding the possibility of an invasion by Ukrainians. In the discussions that took place on the various television channels in Russia, the purpose of the fighter plane's trip over Belgorod was questioned, and the Russian army was urged to refrain from engaging in flights of such high danger. Some observers have hypothesized that the bomb would be ordnance equipped with wings that would enable it to glide to faraway targets and a GPS-guided targeting system. The Russian Air Force has just recently begun using floating bombs, and some military experts are concerned that they would be prone to inaccuracies. Boris Razin, a pro-Russian military expert and blogger, said in a post on Telegram that the crash may have been the consequence of a malfunction in a GPS navigation kit linked to ammo carried by the Su-34. Razin's speculation was based on the theory that the disaster could have been caused by a malfunction in the GPS navigation kit. Officials in Ukraine and military analysts believe that Russia is utilizing the kits to make unguided munitions into low-cost alternatives to precision air weapons. On the other hand, Peter Layton, a visiting researcher at the Griffith Asia Institute as well as a former officer in the Royal Australian Air Force, stated that the explosions were, quote, odd. Layton characterized the incident at Belgorod as strange for a number of different reasons. The MO detonated before everything else. In the event of an emergency, the ammunition is typically discharged in a secure mode. If the explosive projectile of the bomb is not particularly sensitive to shock, then it will not detonate when it is dropped. Second, a pilot will typically aim a bomb into an area that is not populated when they do so. Third, in the event that there is a malfunction, it is anticipated that a fighter plane will release all of the ammo rather than just one. On the other hand, this most recent explosion, which serves as a precursor to the uprising, is reminiscent of an explosion that took place in January. An explosion that occurred at a military base in the Korokhansky district of the Belgorod region in Russia resulted in the deaths of 3 troops and the injuries of 16 more. Reports from the local media indicate that the explosion took place as a result of a sergeant attempting to assert his control over his unit by throwing a hand grenade at them. The RGD-5 grenade was the source of the explosion that occurred. Following the detonation of the hand grenade, the ammunition that was stored in the military installation also went off, which caused a significant fire to break out. The area that was impacted by the fire measured 450 square meters. After a total of 4 hours of work, the fire was put out by the firefighters. This explosion, which was produced by the Russian sergeant, was covered up by the soldiers since they had not received adequate training. There is no denying the fact that many of the soldiers are illiterate. However, it is very difficult to identify whether a lack of training is the primary reason for the explosion of the grenade or whether the riot fire blazing in the soldiers is the primary reason for the explosion. The cracks in the Russian army don't just stop here by any means. It was stated that a fire caused by a violation of a safety rule at a tank maintenance plant led the ammunition to explode, which resulted in the destruction of one tank and the damage of 2 more tanks in the area. This explosion stood out as one of the most notable explosions. In the month of January, maintenance workers who were fixing an At-72 tank in the Belgorod area were responsible for its unintentional detonation. On many social media channels, there was widespread coverage of allegations that the technician who rebuilt the T-72 tank was an incompetent mechanic. The explosion was said to have caused no injuries. As a result, if the Moscow army continues to make similar blunders and show such a lack of care, the mission of the armed formations in Kiev will be made much simpler. These cracks in the Russian army started having a severe impact on Russian society when the force led by Vladimir Putin started to fall apart and destroy itself. The most recent explosion that was brought on by the hypersonic fighter jet scared the people living in Russia, and it made the Kremlin government very angry. The inadequacy of the Moscow troops on the battlefield is on the verge of inciting a rebellion among the populace. Because the conflict in Ukraine dragged on for so long, not only the Russian soldiers serving in the army but also the Russian citizens living in the countryside lost faith in the leadership of their country. We won't know how this instability and disruption will impact the conflict until we wait and see what happens. Do not forget to turn on your alerts and subscribe to our channel so that you may be instantly updated about any new videos that we upload. It all began in Crimea, and it will all come to a conclusion in Crimea. These are the words that were spoken in 2022 by the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, as he was describing his country's resistance to Russia's most recent war of conquest. The liberation of the peninsula from the occupation of Moscow's troops is probably Kiev's most audacious military objective. The territory known as Crimea extends into the Black Sea and encompasses a portion of the Sea of Azov. The ancient peninsula is an essential part of the puzzle that is the regional strategic landscape, and keeping lucrative commercial maritime routes open depends on its presence. However, Ukraine must put up a vigorous defense in order to win such an award. In order to accomplish what it set out to do, Ukraine is crossing Putin's red line by conducting operations on the peninsula. Let's take a more in-depth look at the operation that Ukraine is running on the Pearl of the Black Sea. Explosions could be heard throughout Crimea early on Monday morning. The gloominess of the night sky is pierced by the explosions that are created by unmanned aerial vehicles, which are essential for activities that take place across borders. The video that was circulated across various social media platforms suggests that the most recent assault on Kiev took place in Sevastopol. It seems as though the explosion depicted in the video happened in the sky above the port of Sevastopol. The Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Navy was located in Sevastopol, and Ukraine used unmanned aerial vehicles to attack it. Moscow provided support for Sevastopol. A statement to this effect was issued by Governor Mikhail Razvozhayev on his Telegram channel. He indicated that there had been an attempt to attack Sevastopol. At 3:30 in the morning, Hayev, who works for Mikhail Razvo, asserted that the drones had been destroyed on the outside roadside, which is a sheltered location located outside the port. According to the official, only one of the drones survived, while the rest were either destroyed or exploded. According to Razvozhayev, the explosions, no objects were harmed in any way by the explosions. The Hayev Razvo reported that the city is calm at the moment, but all of the forces and services are currently prepared for conflict. A user on Telegram made a comment about Razvo's statement, noting that there were reports of damage to the peninsula as a result of explosions. Razvo's high remark was in response to the comment. The user on the social networking platform made reference to photographs of shattered windows that were shown on the local news channel. The accusations made by the local news channel suggest that the drone strike caused damage to the structures as well as the breaking of the windows of some beach bungalows. Residents of Sevastopol have voiced their alarm regarding the recent spate of drone attacks that have taken place in their city. On the other hand, a few of the city's inhabitants claimed that they were accustomed to the explosions that occurred. Elena Kudrenko said when drones attack, it is only natural for you to wake up. There is not a single place on this planet where you can get some rest. The home begins to tremble, and you become concerned about the safety of your children. Olga Lanchokova, another resident, stated that we have become accustomed to the continuous noise and the military exercises. It's become much less noticeable to us. In addition, there has been no prompt response from Ukraine in regard to the blasts. Nearly never has the Ukrainian capital openly claimed responsibility for actions that have taken place within Russia or on territory in Ukraine that is controlled by Russia. According to an announcement made by the Russian Ministry of Defense, Ukrainian drones were used in an attack against the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. The guarantees were broken, which puts in jeopardy the possibility of extending the grain agreement for the Black Sea. It was pointed out in the written statement that was issued by the ministry that Russia had stopped the agreement on the sale of grain goods from Ukrainian ports due to the fact that Ukraine had assaulted the ships that were part of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. After the announcement was made, the agreement was only renewed with Turkey's pledges and Ukraine's written commitments that they would not utilize Ukraine's ports or humanitarian corridor in military actions against Russia. This was the only reason the deal was renewed. It appears that Russia is attempting to coerce Ukraine at the moment by putting forward the grain agreement in an effort to do so. In spite of this, Russia has begun to boost its security measures in Crimea out of fear that Kyiv may launch a strike. As Russia gets ready for what they believe will be a response from Ukraine, tensions appear to be growing on the peninsula. Recent satellite imagery reveals that Russia is constructing a network of defense lines in Crimea as well as digging trenches along the beaches of the peninsula. Aggressors face a number of risks due to the unique problems posed by Crimea's geography. Because of the strategic importance of Crimea to President Vladimir Putin of Russia, it is reasonable to anticipate that Russian forces, along with local populations who are supportive of Russia's cause, will put up a robust defense there. In another recent development, retired U.S. Army Europe Commander Lieutenant General Ben Hodges detailed 3 phases by which Kyiv troops may reclaim Crimea, beginning with Ukraine's long-awaited spring counterattack. Hodges was the commander of the U.S. Army Europe. The Lodges pointed out that the way Ukrainians think about this topic can vary greatly. He stated that Ukrainians are knowledgeable about the region's history, geography, and climate. He stated that he believed Kyiv had almost flawless intelligence on what was going on in Crimea. He was referring to the situation there. According to what he said, Kyiv would not be able to guarantee the safety of commercial maritime traffic in the Black Sea until it freed the entire peninsula, including the key ports of Odessa and Mykolaiv. According to Hodges, both of these regions, which are firmly under the jurisdiction of the Ukrainian government, will continue to be threatened by Crimea. Consequently, what measures can Kyiv take to lessen the danger posed by Russia in Crimea? Hodges emphasized how important it is to first separate the peninsula from the rest of the country. Cutting the land bridge, which stretches from the southern Russian border west of Rostov on the Don to seize Donetsk, Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, and the Dnipro River, is one way to cut Crimea off from the rest of Russia and isolate the region. Is the most significant victory for Moscow in the war that has lasted for more than a year. The corridor gives Russia the ability to better provide for the Crimean Peninsula, which, up until February 2022, will be dependent on the Kerch Strait Bridge, which is enriched with ships. If Ukrainian forces are able to advance all the way to the border of Crimea, the important corridor could be put in jeopardy by their journey southward from Zaporizhia and eastward from Kherson. It will be possible to fire on a significant number of the peninsula's most important military and infrastructure targets. Targeting Russian command posts, troop concentrations, and supply hubs with both domestic technology and long-range munitions developed in the West has proven to be a strength of the Ukrainian armed forces, which have shown great proficiency in this area. There are a number of potential targets in Crimea, notably the air base and naval facility at Sevastopol, both of which have already been targeted. Hodges placed a strong emphasis on the fact that significant bases should be bombed during the second phase of the offensive. According to Hodges, the addition of Western weapons might provide the advantage that Ukraine needs to achieve its goal. In Kyiv, There are currently high-motion artillery rocket systems produced in the United States that are armed with guided multiple-launch rocket system munitions. These rockets have a range of around 90 kilometers. Hodges reported that the United States government had refused to supply the longest-range HIMARS munitions despite repeated requests from the Ukrainian government. In the event that the Ukrainians had attacked EMS, for instance, the Black Sea Fleet would have been forced to evacuate Sevastopol a long time ago. They should have arrived there a long time ago. Fighting on the peninsula would be difficult for a number of reasons. In addition, the Ukrainian military will have to contend with the presence of hundreds of thousands of inhabitants who were born in Russia. The results of the elections and referendum in 2014 demonstrated that the population of Crimea that was born in Ukraine had a higher level of support for Russia than it did in the rest of the country. When Russian troops took control of the peninsula, it is believed that thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and officials made their way to safety elsewhere. According to Hodges, if Ukraine is going to move forward with its nearly decade-long process of integration with Russia and unbroken ideological training, the Ukrainian military would likely have to interact with the local population. It is necessary for you to travel there, clean it up, and then inhabit it. He indicated that this is not a simple undertaking, yet Kyiv is capable of doing it. He suggested that if Russia were to lose control of Crimea, it would hasten the end of the larger war, which has been going on for more than 9 years, albeit with varied degrees of severity. In a nutshell, the leadership of Ukraine conceals the precise location of the imminent counterattack that they plan to launch. Because it is the area that provides the quickest access to Crimea, the eastern half of Kherson is an area that should be considered. Despite this, the Ukrainian military will need to cross the existing Dnipro River and build a sustainable beachhead in order to accomplish this goal, taking into account the successes experienced by the Ukrainian army up until this point. It is not completely out of the question for Kyiv to accomplish notable successes with its counterattacks. If you follow us, you will receive immediate updates regarding the situation in Crimea. It is essential to alter the trajectory of the conflict, recognize the optimal moment, and implement the appropriate approach. This goal has been met thus far by the Ukrainian army, which has also shown success with its new operation, surprise tactics, and sudden raids as major methods at the front. Conducting stealthy raids on the adversary while they are unaware of what's going on can provide you with a significant edge. This concept was used by Germany during the Second World War to carry out the Blitzkrieg operation against the armed forces of Russia. There are a lot of challenges involved in the preparation and logistics of the lighting operation. The German military adhered to a strategy known as Blitzkrieg, which translates to lightning operation. During World War II, Russian soldiers faced an uphill battle against this strategy, which had become their worst nightmare. The doctrine's objective is to first stop the adversary from creating a consistent defense by launching sudden and unexpected assaults, and then to quickly dismantle that defense once it has been established. This type of all-out attack takes a high level of integrity, but if executed at the precise moment, this renowned lightning-quick strategy has the potential to alter the tide of an entire fight. Now, with the assistance of the United States and Germany, Ukraine is making preparations to employ the same strategy against the armed forces of Russia. To free Crimea, the Ukrainian armed forces are mustering a special force of 40,000 troops to travel there. In what ways, then, is the Ukrainian army getting ready for this? And what are the generals of the United States saying about this matter? What steps could Putin have taken to put the Russian military in a position where they were both favorable and powerless, as the Oracle sees it? We conducted an investigation into the specifics of the new operation that the Ukraine was conducting with a highly trained army of 40,000 and hundreds of modern Western tanks. As a direct result of our investigation, we have come across some really unique information. Oracle Eyes is committed to providing you with the most up-to-date and accurate news through the use of independent journalism. You are able to help us out by clicking on the Super Thanks button down below. In June 1942, German troops were using a fresh new strategy of warfare to make rapid advances against the Soviet Union on the Ukrainian steppes. During that period, trench warfare started to become less common. And Germany immediately began employing a strategy known as Blitzkrieg against the forces of the Russian Empire. Now it's the Russian army's turn to experience the battle strategies that left the USSR in utter disbelief. This time, though, the Ukrainian army, which numbers in the tens of thousands, has begun employing this time-honored strategy in its conflict with Russia. The army of Ukraine is currently doing everything in its power to deliver the decisive blow by integrating its war strategies with methods that are both effective and devastating. The Ukrainian military is gearing up for a Big Bang-style counterattack, which may mean making advances into Russian-occupied territory that are hundreds of miles away. It is common knowledge that the Ukraine has established a new network of storm brigades for the Blitzkrieg. This network consists of anything from 12 to 18 battalions, each of which contains a number of thousands of men. According to an announcement made by the Ukrainian General Staff, the total number of Ukrainians who are scheduled to participate in this attack is approximately 40,000. On the other hand, after the pro-Western protests in Kiev, former commander of the United States Army Europe, General Ben Hodges, indicated that the key to winning the war was to win the Crimea. According to General Hodges, the main purpose of the massive army of 40,000 people that Ukraine is building for the Blitzkrieg should be to seize control of the Crimean Peninsula. Actually, Mr. Hodges is correct in his assessment, since once Crimea is freed, everything comes to an end and undergoes significant change. The success of the 40,000-strong army that Ukraine has trained for Blitzkrieg operations is the most crucial factor at this point. General Hodges has stated that in order for the Ukraine to accomplish this overarching objective, they will be aiming precision weapons at specific targets in an effort to destroy the land bridge. In addition, United States General Ben Hodges reported that the large 40,000-strong force of the Ukrainians will most likely advance on the city of Melitopol, which is located in Ukraine close to the northern coast of the Sea of Azov. As part of the initial phase of the Blitzkrieg, they may attempt to destroy command and supply centers on the peninsula, in addition to launching attacks against Russian air bases and the Russian Black Sea Fleet. When exactly the Blitzkrieg strategy will be carried out is something of a mystery to everyone. As a result of the Ukrainian military's intense preparations, it is anticipated that counterattacks will take place in the summer rather than in the spring, as was originally planned. Based on the present topographical conditions in Ukraine, it appears that the snow and ice that covered the ground over the winter have melted away, leaving behind muddy and frequently impassable dirt roads. As a result, the execution of the Blitzkrieg operation over the summertime appears to be the option that is most likely to materialize. It is also one of the forecasts that the Blitzkrieg operation that is being planned by the Ukrainian troops will be similar to the ground attack that the United States conducted during Desert Storm. On the other hand, as the summer draws closer, it appears that Crimea will serve as the jumping-off point for the Blitzkrieg operation that the Ukrainian army will be conducting. Vladimir Putin, the leader of Crimea, stands to lose not just the war but also his own reputation and the future of Russia if the scenario described above comes to pass, i.e., if the Russian forces are defeated. The question therefore becomes why Ukraine decided to embrace the Blitzkrieg doctrine all of a sudden. In fact, there are two responses available to this inquiry. The first of these is the fact that the Ukrainian army's newly acquired battle tanks, which are of the Western style, will be allowed to participate in the conflict. The second factor is the combat aircraft that Poland has agreed to first provide to the Ukrainian armed forces. The first line of defense for the Blitzkrieg doctrine is represented by these first battle tanks. Tanks are described as being of a supporting nature to infantry in the game Blitzkrieg. The tanks are dispersed among the infantry groups in accordance with this guiding idea. And this tactic is used to employ them to shatter the enemy resistance and help the infantry advance at locations in the conflict where the infantry has difficulties advancing. As a result, the Blitzkrieg strategy will rely heavily on tanks with a Western design that will be supplied to the Ukrainian army. In this scenario, the United States of America will supply the Ukrainian army with 31 M1 Abrams, 14 Leopard 2, and Poland Leopard tanks, in addition to other types of combat tanks from their stockpile. The Ukrainian army will be able to satisfy the most fundamental requirement of the Blitzkrieg tactic in this manner. The jets that Poland will supply to the Ukrainian army are the second reason that has contributed to the unexpected acceptance of the Blitzkrieg doctrine by the Ukrainian army. As was noted, Poland has made the announcement that it will provide Ukraine with 4 MiG fighter jets from the time period of the Soviet Union. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine the previous year, Poland will be the first member of the NATO alliance to send military aircraft there. The Ukrainian armed forces will be able to give substantial air support to the tanks in their arsenal during ground operations once these aircraft arrive at the army. This will allow the Ukrainian armed forces to accomplish their mission. Yes, the Ukraine did indeed make a significant choice when it decided to employ the blitzkrieg strategy in order to win the war. In order for this plan to be successful, what do you believe are the necessary ingredients? Let's take a look at it together, shall we? In order for the blitzkrieg doctrine to be successful, there are 4 crucial requirements that must be met. Strong terrain, strong air support, solid logistics, and good coordination are the 4 components of this. Especially in the past few days, control has been assumed by the Ukrainian armed forces. As they fight against the Russians in their own country, Ukrainian soldiers make greater use of the territory around them. The Ukrainian armed forces are in a very strong position in terms of receiving air support at the moment. Warplanes of the type Su-27 and MiG-29 make up the bulk of the Ukrainian Air Force's inventory. Maintain your role as a source of significant difficulty for the Russians. In addition to this, as was said earlier, we must, of course, disregard the warplanes that Poland will supply to Ukraine. Additionally, the Ukrainian armed forces made significant advancements in the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, which is a relatively new subject. The unmanned aerial drones known as TB2 were able to save the day for the Ukrainian military thanks to their friend Turkey. In a nutshell, the Ukrainians have an advantage when it comes to the support they receive from the air. As for the third requirement, the Ukrainian army has largely secured control of the most important logistical crossings and routes. The areas surrounding Bachmut contain the most of the significance of these logistics corridors. In an effort to exert its authority over the flow of logistical goods between Donetsk and Luhansk, Ukraine is making efforts to seize key link points. When it comes to tank battles and providing logistical assistance, the link roads between Kromov and Ivanevska are very important. These 2 cities are also home to highway links that are controlled by Ukrainian soldiers. Continued efforts are being made by Russian and Wagner forces to recover control of key link routes, the majority of which are still under the control of Ukraine. However, it appears that the Ukrainians will not give up easily on this matter. In a nutshell, the logistics criteria that were necessary for the blitzkrieg doctrine to be successful have been met by Ukrainian forces. The final requirement is a high level of coordination. Especially in light of the fact that the Russian military draws its strength from outside sources, the Ukrainian army has made significant strides in areas such as coordination, harmony, order, being apocryphal, and being systematic. During this time period, the Ukrainian army placed a strong emphasis on being more professional. As a direct consequence of this, the Ukrainian armed forces have evolved into one of the few militaries in the world, not only in terms of the quality of their military hardware but also in terms of the level of unity and cooperation that exists within the force. In a nutshell, the Ukrainian army creates the perfect environment for Russia to reenact the blitzkrieg strategy that Germany used against the USSR during World War II.